Thank you, Father. So before I start the formal eulogy, I'm going to go off script a little bit and talk about our mother, who couldn't be here today. This was really all about her. This was supposed to be a really special day for her and my dad, for no reasons that you probably know. But my dad, a couple years ago, I asked him, what would you like us to do for you now that you're going to come? Is there a meal that you'd like to eat? Is there someone you'd like to see? Is there a place you'd like to go? And my dad said, no, I've lived a full life and I'm ready to go. That was 2 years ago. 2 days later, he called me up and he said, you know what? I have thought of something I'd like. I would like to see Miles Bunting. Miles is our grandson. Miles, you want to stand up and just wave? And so, and Forbes, as he always does, knows stuff that we don't know. He says, you know, he's the only great-grandson of mine who is a boy who's going to carry on the Bunting name as of now, and I'd like to meet him. Well, that was right before COVID hit. And for 2 years, we wanted to do that trip and could not. And today, on my parents' 67th wedding anniversary, we were going to surprise my dad. And we already had booked the flights and the hotel. My mom knew about it. She knew that Willow and I and other family were going to be there to celebrate, but I was really looking forward to the moment when Miles was going to kick Forbes' butt in chess his video game, because you probably for reasons that you all know, we are not doing that today. And then when my dad passed, we thought, you know, how touching would to do this on my parents' 67th wedding anniversary. And so this was going to be a celebration of Josie and Forbes. So when we heard the news about my mother today, who is undergoing surgery as we speak, I thought about adversity, and I thought about my parents and how their whole lives been about overcoming adversity. My father grew up dirt poor. None of this is in the eulogy, so forgive me. By the way, I want to say out front, my mom was a stickler and said 60 minutes, but you got to keep this to 60 minutes. And so I told all of my siblings, you guys got to keep it to 5, I have to keep it to 15. And she was like, you know, Forbes, he was over the top, we're not going to do the 80, we're not going to do 90. So Father and I kind of conspired that we'd do 80, but I told my brothers, throw it out the window, Josie's not here, go as long as So Forbes wins again. But back to adversity, you know, my dad didn't talk about it, but he grew up dirt poor with he and my Aunt Jane. He told me in a rare moment that he was bullied and made fun of on the playground, and one of the reasons why, because he always wore hand-me-downs from his older sister. And so when it was cold, he'd be wearing a wool coat that was a girl's coat, and the kids would tease him, Forbes wearing, you know, a lady's coat or a girl's coat. And my mother, similarly, had a really, really tough road as a kid. Imagine being in a boarding school without your parents, getting a phone call, and being told to go to the office and being told that your mother has passed, and now you, as a 12-year-old, must go tell your younger brother and your younger sister in boarding school that your mother had passed. My mother was the strength of this family. Everybody loved Forbes. Forbes could tell a story like anybody, but the rod was my mom. And it's just a shame she's not here today because, again, neither one of them boasted or talked about their achievements, but my mom was #1 in her class in high school. She was a 4.0 student, and her ambition was to go to college. And she had a college scholarship, a full ride, but she had 2 siblings to take care of, and there was a move to Detroit, and she passed that opportunity. And so I think before I start the eulogy, I just want to celebrate both of our parents, that this is a moment of adversity not having my mother here. Fortunately, we have a videographer here, and this will all be recorded. We invite you all to come afterward to a celebration at the resort where we'll similarly record comments from family and friends. So with that, I'm going to go to the regular program. Good morning. My name is Glenn Forbes Bunting. I'm the eldest of 6 Bunting children, and I have the distinction and honor of being the only one that shares my father's 3 names, Forbes Glenn Bunting. As I said, today's a special day. We come here to celebrate a life well lived of 89 years and a joyous marriage of 67 years. So friends who knew my father and people who read his obit said, you know, Forbes was a real character. And upon reflection, I thought, no, Forbes wasn't a real character. He was a character's character. He was a funny man. He had an easygoing manner, a gift for storytelling. He had an ability to make people laugh. And the amazing thing about my dad was, he didn't care or worry about whether you were laughing with him or you were laughing at him. He didn't care. He was a simple man with a simple motto. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to be funny. When our daughter-in-law asked our father a few years ago to help with an inscription on a bench that was going to be overlooking a lake at Sylvan Glen, a golf course my parents played, memorializing her father, Forbes, with his quick wit and his humor, she thought that would be the perfect person to help out. My dad did come up with an inscription. It was damn funny, and for obvious reasons, it was never used. And here's what he wrote for the bench and the past. This seat is put here for your sake. A great place for a break. And if the view doesn't suit you, go jump in the lake. That was our dad. We all know Yogi Berra and the famous yogi-isms, things like, you know, it ain't over till it's over. I found one I thought was particularly apropos for today. You should always go to other people's funerals, or they won't come to yours. Well, our dad had 4 isms, and which we all knew as kids, which were repeated often, and I selected just a few to share. Don't believe everything you think. This one turned out to be great advice for a journalist of 30 years and being a reporter and editor. Always believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. Some other 40 gems. What other people think about you is none of your business. One of our favorites. Always toss litter out the window when no one's looking. Now, everyone is familiar with the golden rule proclaimed by Jesus of Nazareth: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Our father had his own golden rule that he lived by, and he passed down to generations of Buntings. Do unto others before they do unto you. Another Forbyism was, rules are made for the fools who obey them. Forby never played by the rules. When we were kids growing up on Spoon Street, a daily ritual was packing into the back seat, which was a bench, of his 62 Plymouth Avenue. And we would go to Mac's liquor store on 12 Mile. And there'd be 6, 8, sometimes 10 kids just jammed in that seat. And he would drive, he would go in and get a quart of Stroh's beer, and he'd get a pretzel stick for each one of us. And the goal among the kids was to see how long you could make the pretzel stick last with the salt on the side. So one day we're there, and he backs up the car, and he goes to push. It's a push-button transmission on the Plymouth Valley, and he can't get it to push. And gets out of the car, it's underneath. Forbes can't, opens up the hood, it's stuck in reverse. What are we going to do? Forbes drove home in reverse. Imagine 8 kids. Here he is. He's got his Stroh's in one hand, he's got his arm around the back. He looks over, he's driving in reverse. Get down, you kids, get down. I can't see. We're looking around, neighbors are looking at us. 12 Mile Road, make a left, I'll go a different way, it won't be so obvious, he said. He drove home about 1.5 miles in reverse. And that was our day, never played by the rules. Another Forbeism was worrying never did anything for anybody. My dad seemingly never worried about a thing. If he did, he never showed it. The last thing he worried about was money and finances. That was left to our mother. And he was a member of the United Auto Workers Union for 25 years before he got promoted to management. And there were 2 times during those years where Chrysler was struck. And growing up in Detroit, in the street we did, every house was identified by the father who worked at a auto company. So there was, and it was always great, Fords. Oh, they're a Fords family. Oh, they're a Chrysler family. They're a GM family. Well, in 1970, the UAW did a rare thing. It decided not to target one company, but 2. And as kids and as parents, you were really worried about a strike and what an impact it would have on your family. And it was just known, and it was part of the DNA of the community. My dad did not worry one bit about a strike, at all. And at one point, I was 12 years old, it was 14 years old, 1970. I said, Dad, my friends are worried, other people are worried, Mom's worried, how come we not worried? My dad said, son, let me tell you something. I'm gonna get 85% of my pay for the first 4 weeks of the strike. I'm not gonna have to get up in the morning. I'm not gonna have to get on my suit. I'm not gonna have to buy lunch. I'm gonna be able to sit here all day and drink beer. Now what's the word? Okay. Dad was a humble man. He was a big talker, but he was not a big bragger. He never talked about, unless you prodded him, about growing up dirt poor, or his service in the Army during the Korean War, or his greatest career achievement, designing the Hendy engine. But he loved bragging about his greatest achievements, and that was the 6 kids. And nobody articulates that better than our auntie, Aunt Nedia, who has a great saying. Auntie Belchard is saying for us.
In the thick and thin of their marriage, I always reminded them, we have 6 children and 6 winners. Nobody else can say that.
6 winners, she would always tell them. Well, really quickly, Forbes, in his own way, appreciated and cultivated each of those winners. For me, he was really proud of the fact that I graduated from college, got a bachelor's and master's degree, and was the first one in the family to do that. For Mark, it was not 1, not 2, but 6 perfect 300 games in bowling. And my dad, that was my dad's greatest sports achievement. For BJ, it was being the best athlete of the family and the only one to get a sports scholarship, an athletic scholarship in college. For Greg, it was following in my dad's footsteps. Greg just recently retired as an engineer with the same company, General Motors, his entire life. For Andy, well, for Andy, it was just being mini Forbes. He's the closest thing to Forbes you'll ever see. And for Barb, it was bringing into my dad's life Chris DeLacy, who we always refer to as his 5th son. My dad lived and loved sports. He was an avid golfer and an avid bowler. He told me once, quote, I played baseball, I coached baseball, I managed baseball. Then I got around to umpiring. I just like to be in the game. One of the great mementos that I have of my father is this indicator. It's not a clicker, it's an indicator. And this is what my dad and I did for several years in the 1970s. We were umpires together. We were a 2-man crew. We had to have each other's back. As an umpire, there were no instant replays or challenges back then. You were always right. That came easy for Buntings. Even when you knew you were wrong. And there were times where my dad or I, or both of us, would get a lot of flack, a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, a lot of kicking the dirt. And we used to joke about one time, I made a call at first base, probably blew the call. The manager came rushing out, he's yelling in my face, he's screaming, he's kicking dirt, he's throwing his head down. Finally I said, okay, you're gonna get down here, you're gonna kick it out of me. Okay, I'm done. He walks back, and loud enough for everybody to hear, my dad's behind home plate. He said, I swear, that kid of yours is blind. Like father, like son. My dad's prized possession was an A2000 Wilson Love. That was the top of the line, the most expensive. He played third base, the hot corner, for his Chrysler softball team. And I went there, and it was a very competitive team. These guys were really serious. They won most of the championships when they played. I was the bat boy. And there were great memories. But I always pestered my dad as I got older that I wanted to play with that A2000 glove. And he said, no, that's my glove, that's my thing, I'm not giving it to you. So when I was around 12 and I was playing in Pony League, he relented and let me use the A2000 glove. Third game, I lost the glove. I vanished off the bench. I'm convinced to this day somebody stole it. We looked at it, I was in complete panic. Walked home, those days you got to walk home. I was absolutely mortified having to confront my father and let him know about the glove. I didn't tell him until the next day because I thought mine might turn up. My dad, when I told him that, there wasn't any anger, he wasn't PO'd, he didn't chastise me. He took it, and in his silent way, he forgave me. And years later, I wrote an article about our umpiring together. I asked him about the 2000 glove, and here was his quote to me. That glove was my pride and joy. When you came home without it, I could have shot the both of us. Now, I don't know whether he was serious about it. Clearly, he hadn't forgotten. But the important point is, my father, our father, was a man of great forgiveness. He taught a lot of us to drive a car well before we should have been driving a car. For me, it was like 13. By the time I got to be 15, I figured I knew how to drive. I didn't know anything. And we're going down Van Road, which is a 5-mile dirt road between the highway and the lakefront cabin. It's a brown Plymouth station wagon, 6 kids, I'm behind the wheel. In Michigan, for whatever reason, they basically plow the dirt roads because they have such potholes and getting through a winter. And my dad said, slow down a little bit, take it easy here. Well, a deer emerges, sure enough. He says, take it easy, go straight. I, of course, hit the brakes, turn to the right, dig in, car's in the ditch. Heart's pounding a million miles, right? We all have to get out, we have to wait for a passerby, a couple of guys help. We put it back onto the road, ready to go. Now, I am just embarrassed, I'm humiliated, I'm ashamed. My dad is just gonna kill me. What does he do? He hands me the keys and said, drive slower this time. And I drove the rest of the way, and I felt so good about my dad, because how many dads would let you complete the trip? So let's talk about how my dad went out, because he went out in classic Forbes fashion. Excuse me, I'm going to make sure I'm not getting my pages all mixed up. So on Saturday night, before he died, he got a device from Mark and Sue that allowed him to just say commands to Siri or what was it? Alexa, and play songs. And my dad loved music. And so Saturday night, my sister B and our dad, he's in the hospital bed, but in the den, and they're just playing songs. And they're just enjoying each other. My dad says, Alexa, play A Boy Named Sue by Johnny Cash. And BJ says, Alexa, play Send in the Clowns by Judy Collins. They sat and chatted, and then it came for a special song that my dad really loved, Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You. And they're listening to it, and BJ's talking to my dad, and our dad turns to BJ and says, BJ, can you just be quiet so we can listen to this? That was Saturday. On Sunday night, Mark and Sue were there, and Mark spent till midnight again with my dad, our dad, who would normally, be asleep by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and sleep all day long, all night long. Well, they're watching the Olympics, and they're talking about my dad's childhood, our dad's childhood, and he is reciting things that no man his age and in his health should be able to recite. And one of them was the starting lineup, every position player on the 1945 Detroit Tigers World Series team. They had beaten the Cubs in 7 games to win the World Series. It was one of the highlights of my dad's childhood. And he remembered Hack Miller, Skeeter Webb, Hammer and Hank Greenberg, Doc Kramer, Prince Hal Newhouse, Dizzy Trout, He recited every position player for Mark more than 75 years ago. On Monday, he was unconscious. We all got word. We raced to be with him with the hope that we could share final stories and talk to him, and that never came to be. And the family was there on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Come Thursday, the brothers decided we're going to play the loop. And I have to tell you a story about the loop because it really encapsulates everything in a perfect ending. So the loop was the 5 holes in front of our folks' house. Holes have been real long, but for a long time. It was the 13th tee. And when my dad first moved to Pinehurst, he loved the idea that he was a country club member and he could walk out on the 13th tee, play 13, then play 9, 10, 11, 12. And of course, the rules at Pinehurst, most clubs say, well, you can't do that until the end of the day, and you should call in and tell the starter, and they prefer you start on the first hole. Our dad, forget about that. He had a cart, he had golf clubs, he loved playing it. Well, with his kids, you get there, and whenever it is, we're playing the loop today, right? You're going to play the loop? You ready to play the loop? And then there's Josie, our mom, saying, no, you can't play the loop. You've got to check in with the starter. And we would always play the loop. And then when he stopped playing golf, he would get in his car, load it up with beers. We would play the cart. We would play the loop. Whenever a starter or a ranger would find us, his job was to run us off the course. Well, there's no running Forbes off the course. Forbes would say, isn't this great? 3 generations of Buntings. I'm playing with my kids and my grandkids. Hey, have a beer. By the time he got done, you couldn't throw us off the course. So on Thursday, the brothers decided, let's play a loop. And the downside was we had a vigil, we didn't want him to pass, but we thought this is what he would want. And so the brothers played, we had a $20 skins game. And it was an amazing 5 holes, because on the 3rd hole, Andy was way off the green. Andy can't hit a wedge to save his life. So he thought, okay, I'm going to hit the putter. And he said, Forbes, help me here. He hit the putter as hard as he could. It went through weeds, rocks, over a Donald Ross green, around, boom, hits the pin. And he came right up to us and told us that he had asked Forbes for help on that one. So Andy wins that one. We finish, and Mark is down, and of course, in true Forbes fashion, we have to play double or nothing, so we replay the hole. And my second shot into 12 was just an ugly shot. It's like they say, darn, so not pictures on the scorecard. I hit a line drive into a hill, bounced up, we didn't know where it was. It was 1 inch behind the hole. I tapped in for birdie. Thank you, Forbes. So now here's Mark, 10 yards right of the green. He's got a flop shot to number 12, which is a really tough hole. He looks up, looks down, hits it. The wedge shot goes in. At that point, it was a high-five celebration. We all went in the house, and 3 minutes later, surrounded by family, Forbes took his last breath. And we're convinced that he waited for us to finish the loop. So after our father died, Mark took me aside. We hugged each other, and he said, well, now you're the patriarch of the family. And I've thought a lot over the last several days, what does that mean, to be patriarch of the family? And it's really, in my mind, to lead by example. Bunting men are not easy folks to be around and tolerate. Between my lovely wife, Willow, celebrated 40 years, Mark and Sue is about to be 38 years, I believe. We're celebrating 67 years today. So those are 3 women who have endured Bunting men for 150 years. And they can tell you that we take after our father. We can be selfish. We can be stubborn. We're not exactly romantics at heart. Our father proposed to our mother in the parking lot of a bowling alley. Did not get down on his knees. And everyone knows that we can't dance. But I think of lessons and lessons learned. And I came up with 3. One was, don't try to win every argument. Because Lord knows that Forbes did. Empty the dishwasher. One of our sisters made a remark the other day. You know, Dad was pretty good in the kitchen, but I never once ever saw him open a dishwasher or put something in a dishwasher. And the other is drink in moderation. Because you cannot get through a eulogy without mentioning my father and drinking. He was the original bug man. He always had an open can of beer. Always. Right up until the end, when he took his pills first thing in the morning, he'd have a dozen pills lined up, and he'd have screwdriver at the ready, orange juice and vodka. I remember telling my dad, "Yeah, I don't know what's worse for you, the orange juice or the vodka." He goes, "What does it matter when you're my age? You just log those pills down." When I was in college, I came home to watch our father and Dick Dwinell, who was a drinking buddy, coach Andy's Pony League baseball team. And I, looking back, don't know whether I was amused or just appalled at what took place during this 2-hour game. But the kids would literally have red plastic cups, and they would go into a cooler and they'd scoop it up and fill it, and they'd run it out to the third base box, and they'd run it out to the first base box. This was going on the entire game. Now, I know our father, and I know Dick Dwinell, they were not drinking water. So at one point I called Andy over and said, "What is going on here?" He goes, "Oh, that's Big Orange." I go, "What's Big Orange?" He goes, "What's a screwdriver?" I said, "Well, yeah, but they're coaching." He goes, "That's our rallying cry. We always get together, it's Big Orange, Big Orange." They won the championship that year, and they're convinced it was fueled by vodka, orange juice, and Big Orange. So, our father always leavened things with humor. And I'm going to play for you a clip. It's a video clip, but we just need to listen to his words about our father drinking and passing. Let's hope this works.
This may seem a bit odd, but when I pray to my God, I keep hoping and thinking that I'll still be drinking on the other side of the sock.
Did everybody get to hear that? That's our dad. So one last story. Father, forgive me for I have gone on. So when he died on Thursday, the family was there. And I would say with the exception of maybe a Cabernet here and there, a pretty moderate drinker, but I drank a lot that night. It was basically whiskey. There was this nasty whiskey that's a local 2 Trees whiskey with scorched brown sugar. You can imagine such a thing. So Mark drove us home. I don't think he was in any condition to drive. And the next morning the alarm rang at 4:30 a.m. And I had to leave at 5 a.m. to catch a flight. I was in no condition to drive, but I did. And technology being what it was, I got a message on the screen as I was driving that said, "Alert." I had it written down here, so here it is. "Alert. Warning. Driver needs rest. Pull over, please." So I thought, what would Forbes do? Well, Forbes would crack open another can of Budweiser and keep driving. I pulled off the side of the road. Next exit, I got a cup of coffee, got a breath of fresh air, rolled down the window, and turned up the radio. And a song came on the radio that had me, it was perfect. It was perfect and it was magical, just like his death and just like us finishing the loop. And so we're going to play a clip of that song before the next speaker. Thank you, and we love you, Dad.